Hi, folks. Steve Urban here. Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by Marketing 360. My good friend JB Kellogg and his team do such a fantastic job for us and so many other companies. Marketing 360 is the number one platform for small business, and it's everything you need to grow your business. If you need marketing support, I really encourage you to contact them at marketing360.com/Riderflex, and we'll add that link to the description of this episode for easy reference. On today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Gertrude Allen. She's the CEO of Pet Plate. Pet Plate is widely respected as a pioneer in the fresh cooked pet food category, one of the fastest growing categories in the $35 billion pet food industry. Gertrude Allen on the Riderflex podcast today. How you doing, Gertrude?
I'm doing well today. Thank you.
How's the weather in New York? Is it spring? What's it like today?
It's still a chilly spring like weather. We're hoping for warmer days ahead, but and we've gotten a fair amount of rain, which is normal for April.
Okay.
So April showers bring May flowers.
Are you you've been trapped in your apartment there for a little while, I guess, in New York.
Yeah.
You looking forward to getting out, hopefully pretty soon?
Definitely. I mean, at the same time, we're really, because we are in the epicenter of this crisis in New York City. And I'm actually, my home base is in Queens, which is the epicenter within New York City. So it is really still very risky to, kind of contemplate, having society open up. I know they're doing that in some parts of the country. I think we're kind of a long ways off still in New York from that happening. Yep. So we're just, as a family and as a company, a business, we're still just trying to really settle into this new routine of working from home and trying to enjoy ourselves, from home, and not looking too far ahead just yet.
It was interesting, by the way, for the listeners, we're recording this on April 23rd, 2020, in case somebody's listening to this 2 years from now and they're wondering what the hell we're talking about, right in the middle of the coronavirus. Interestingly enough, I always thought virtual happy hours with friends would be weird, but now that I've done a couple of them, it's actually not bad. I'm getting used to that. It's safer, but being in Colorado, which is definitely, quote, an outdoor state, so to speak, lots of activity. Whew, I'm definitely looking forward to getting out of the house a little bit. I hope soon.
Sure.
Give us before we get into Pet Plate and all the business stuff. Can you talk to us a little bit about you personally, and just tell us about Gertrude a little bit, where she grew up, maybe some family stuff, and then where you went to college. I know you went to NYU, and just talk about your early life, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I grew up on Long Island. I'm one of 5 children, very tight-knit family. We had wonderful parents who made our lives really fun and exciting, and actually brought us into the city a lot, from Long Island where we lived. And so that's one of the reasons I went to NYU. I was exposed to the city from a young age, and I found it really exciting compared to suburban life. So when it came time to go to college, I thought what would be great is to just marry those two worlds, being able to live in the middle of a big city, have access to some really great internships, which is something NYU really focuses on. Mm-hmm. And at the same time get, the experience of a really established university. And so I really loved it. And, I moved into the city when I was 17, and I did study journalism. I specialized in public relations. Everything was analog back then. We barely used computers. And then I did start my career in public relations. And I actually moved to Europe just within like a year or two of graduating college, and spent most of my 20s in Europe, which I loved. And it really broadened my horizons. And I'm so glad I did it, because, as you get older, those opportunities become more challenging, when you have family and stuff. So I'm really happy I did that.
It must have watered down your Long Island accent just a little bit. I mean, I knew you were a New Yorker by talking to you in the first 5 minutes, but I didn't quite hear the Long Island. until you started talking about it, and then it came
Yeah.
out just a little bit.
It's true. I lost it. Yeah. I mean, I remember having friends over, especially the friends from abroad, and there were members of my family they couldn't understand because the Long Island accent was so thick. Yeah.
Right, right. And so, yeah, so talk about your career then. So really it was journalism slash marketing slash communications. How did that roll into working for VC and things like that? How did that transition happen? Walk us through some of that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the journalism really was just a great base background for doing public relations, right? So talking to journalists about, products and services that, I wanted to promote for my clients. But that wound up, especially when I moved to Europe, I wound up going more into business development. So I worked for a very large PR agency, and I really helped them set up a network of agencies across Europe, Middle East, and Africa,
Mm.
tied them together so that we were able to pitch pan-European business and international business. And so I was working more on kind of the, biz dev slash marketing front for the PR agency. And that's really how I kind of, I guess, got more exposure to just marketing, in this case, a service. But also, when you start to grow, I was bringing in new business. So I was also having to kind of set up, teams to run the business, and, that you're kind of running like little business units within an agency gave me some exposure to
I
sort of
see.
working, more, let's say, on, growing a business. And from there, I decided, after 10 years of working on the agency side
Hmm.
with various size agencies in the US and Europe, I wanted to then try my hand at working on the corporate side, so directly working for companies.
Mm.
And so, when I got hired, I was generally like the first business hire inside of, a company that, if it was technology, had lots of engineers but didn't have any business people yet. And so I was pretty early in some of these companies where I was helping to really build out like the entire marketing department, that sort of thing. And again, that was helpful in making me understand like what it really takes to also just, start a business.
Hmm.
And one of the, after I did that for a while, one of the companies that I was advising the founder and the CEO, really, we just started to grow that business so rapidly that it sort of led to us making the decision jointly, really, to sell the business. And that's where I got in front of some investors, and specifically private
Ah,
equity investors, because,
ah,
and we did have a successful sale. And,
nice.
so really,
Congratulations.
thank you. So really one thing kind of in my career, I would say over that spanned, almost 20 years of just kind of one thing led to the other.
Mm.
So a lot of people ask me, well, wow, how did you,
Yeah.
do the things you do? How did you get to where you got? And really it was not, there was a master plan, it was very much like one thing led to the other. I mean, at the same time, you have to be really aware of what's going on in your career and what
Yeah.
what all the opportunities are around you, and take advantage of the next opportunity. But I wasn't always, kind of strategizing and seeking things out. I was really more just kind of being really open to what was sort of what lied ahead of me.
And that's key right there, I think, for the listeners. As you're moving along, be open for opportunities. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and you never know how it's going to unfold for you. So
Yeah.
at some point, were you working for an investment firm of some kind when they looked to invest in Pet Plate, and then originally you were an investor or an
Correct.
advisor, and then yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, walk us
Yeah.
through that.
Once I had the good fortune of being able to help sell a business, and go through that transaction on the side of the seller, I was in a better position to then join up with in this case, a VC, a venture capital fund, to look at potential investments into
Nice,
companies. And so
nice.
that's the transition I made there. And I really loved it. I was doing deal flow. So looking for new opportunities to invest in, one of which was Pet Plate. And I was the person, leading that transaction. So doing all the due diligence and papering the,
Hmm.
transaction. And then kind of just as part of that model, we were kind of value add investors where we would put some sweat equity in alongside our financial
Okay.
investment. And so I was working closely with the founder of Pet Plate. And after 6 months of spending time with him just on the sidelines helping out, it became apparent, wow, the founder, who Ronaldo Webb, founder, Pet Plate, single founder, really needed a business partner to help
I
grow the
see.
business. It's very hard to do that, really on your own.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hard to hire at that stage because you're basically one person trying to get the thing off the ground. It's just like a difficult hire to make. So it was just more organic because I was already kind of de facto partnering with him to help him grow the business because we had an interest in the company, right? Having just invested some, significant dollars, for such an early stage business. So I was asked by Ronaldo and other members of the board, would I consider joining, even on a temporary basis, to partner with Ronaldo? I would be the CEO. He would be the founder and chief product officer because he had
I see.
developed the product. And I had more of a business background than he did in terms of, just the collective experience of starting and running businesses or, growing businesses. So that's where we had a very good sort of complementary, skill set, and we're able to partner. And so I did accept the opportunity to join first on a temporary basis. And then after a few months, everything was sort of clicking. And then they turned to me and said, would you consider this permanent? And I said, sure.
Well,
I love what
yeah.
I'm doing, and it's a great opportunity.
Well, did you see? Yeah, but did you also say, well, hey, listen, I really wanted to be a partner in a VC firm and just work from one deal to the next. I didn't really want to
Yes.
get trapped, Yeah.
I did. I mean, for sure there were those discussions, and it was easy for me to say yes to the temporary. It was a little harder for me to say yes to the permanent, but when I kind of like step back and I looked at everything, I thought, doing the opportunity of actually being able to partner with someone and run a whole business and grow a business, that's almost like could be once in a lifetime,
Yep.
in these circumstances. So, whereas I felt like I could return to, being a venture capitalist, working with other VCs.
That's true. Good point.
And, doing deal flow. Like I felt that there's probably a lot of opportunity out there for me, especially if I had a successful run with Pet Plate. I just
that
was
is
being opportunistic. Yeah.
That's a great tip for the listeners. Let's take a deep breath right there and just kind of highlight the fact that what you just said is, hey, if you get an opportunity to start or run a business or work in a startup situation and help build a brand, it literally could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And if it doesn't work or whatever, you can always go back to whatever you were doing or go get another job. But those opportunities, they just don't fall out of the sky every day, right?
Right.
And so to your point, yeah, good decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, just to, not leave any part of the story out, and without getting into any of the details behind it, is that, a lot of times those opportunities, when they first present themselves, they're not lucrative,
Right. Well, most of the time, they're not.
It's a little, you got to take a haircut, or you're taking
Absolutely.
maybe, a step back on salary, but maybe you're taking 2 steps forward on like responsibility, raising your profile, having really the opportunity to prove yourself,
That's right.
and then you can leapfrog, hopefully, sometime later. And I've always had the, I don't know, I've just been flexible, and I've always been able to, fortunately, I've been in a position where I was able to accept that, there might be a bit of a, a sacrifice on the one hand, but it's, in favor of this great opportunity on the other hand. And your mind, I think it behooves people to think like that if they can, and act like that when they can, because it can actually, kind of catapult your career if you're willing to take that, that short-term kind of, hit.
Couldn't agree more. Great advice for aspiring entrepreneurs or people that want to be involved in a startup. Yeah. And in fact, I interview founders all the time on the Riderflex podcast, and rarely have I talked to one that said, yeah, I left my regular job and joined a startup and made more money the first 2 years. Like that just doesn't happen. Like you're going to sacrifice.
Yes.
I want to ask you about some more CEO advice and maybe some board advice. But before we do that, can you give the listeners that don't know anything about Pet Plate, can you just give us a nice kind of overview of where Pet Plate is, today, and talk about it a little bit? Go ahead.
Absolutely. So the company was founded in the fall of 16. It launched nationally really in the spring of 17. That's when I joined as CEO. So we've been in market for 3 years now. We've grown our customer base really nicely. We have probably well over 10,000 customers at this point.
Nice.
We do distribute nationally, so into every state in the contiguous U.S.
Hmm.
We're a Series A stage company, so that means we raised a Series A round of funding in January.
I saw
Uh,
that. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so we raised 9 million. We had
Saw that.
previously raised 4 million in a seed, and prior to that, there was about $2 million raised in pre-seed money. So a lot of money's gone into building the business. We now have a team of about 12 people. We are actively
Okay.
hiring.
Okay.
We expect to get to 20 people by the end of the year. I think we have about 5 to 7 job specs right now out there in the world. So we are looking to hire some new people to
Great.
grow the business. We were very lucky. Again, to your point about the timing, you'd have to know that this is happening in the world, the pandemic, and the fact that
Yep.
we were able to close our round of funding January 14th was really just a blessing, because
Whew.
it would have been very difficult and not impossible, but certainly what I hear, it's of course very difficult to raise money right now.
Oh
And
my
we
gosh,
did
yes.
attract some really just incredible investors, including the venture capital arm of General Mills, so the large food
Hmm.
company, and a family office called DF Enterprises. And they're both on our board, and they've been just tremendous, supporting us, pre-COVID and during COVID, and they're just great investors.
Interesting dynamics to deal with a family office versus somebody like a General Mills arm, right?
Yes. They really like working together. I mean, of course, they kind of interviewed each other, when they were
Oh,
looking to co-invest in this round, and they felt lots of synergy. I mean, the family office, actually, the family behind the office is actually a large CPG family.
I see.
So
Okay.
that probably helped. But even so, I think just in general that it was actually more synergistic, I think, to have two different types of investors versus two
Interesting.
identical or very similar type that would maybe be butting heads. This, kind of works out well. It's a pretty good, I'd say diverse group.
Great experience for you to have been the person on the other side investing and dissecting and asking a bunch of questions to the founder and the people there. And now all of a sudden
Yeah,
you're on the other side of the table, pitching, asking for cash,
yes,
and they're asking you a bunch of questions.
that's right. That's right. Tables turned. That's for sure.
For sure. You mentioned hiring and stuff. Let me ask you this, because at Riderflex, as you probably already know, our regular job is a recruiting firm, and we focus a
Yeah,
lot on culture. I'm guessing you're establishing your culture now, with 12 people, and you're hiring more. What do you what is it you're looking to build from a company culture perspective, and how do you make sure you sustain that as you start to hire new people?
absolutely. And I should say, our mission at Pet Plate is to take care of dogs' nutritional needs. That's what we do. We are driven by feeding dogs the healthiest food that we can develop, and in the most convenient fashion possible to pet parents everywhere. So we take very healthy ingredients, all human grade ingredients. Everything's natural, nothing's processed. So it's meat, vegetables, fruits, healthy grains, vitamins, minerals. We cook it in a USDA facility, so everything is cooked according to human food standards. And then all the meals are pre-portioned according to the dog's caloric needs. So based on their weight, age, breed, body condition, activity level, we then determine how much food the dog needs at each meal. And that's how we pack the food into cups that would be, portioned according to the dog's needs. And then,
Ah,
yeah, those meals get shipped to the customer on a regular basis. So, sometimes if it's a large dog, it'll ship every week because that dog needs a lot of food, and you only can put so much food in a box, and you can only fit so much food in your fridge or freezer. But a small dog, we probably could send a month's worth of food to that very small dog, because again, they just have very small meals. So we can accommodate, all the meals, let's say, in a box. So the shipping frequency varies depending on the dog's needs. And so there is a great, convenience factor. Obviously, you get the food sent to your door, it's already cooked. You can serve it cold right out of the cup, or you can actually microwave the meal, because the cup is microwavable. Or, if somebody wants to get fancy with it, they could put it in a skillet and warm it up that way. But dogs love the food. It's, extremely delicious. It's nutritious. Dogs see benefits, very, very quickly. And so, it's been a joy to feed dogs, especially during a pandemic like the one we're experiencing, where, people are so concerned about their health and their welfare and their safety. And so we're really in a great position to be able to continue to, kind of fulfill our mission.
Is your business up? Is your business up because people couldn't go to the store?
Sorry?
Is your business up because people couldn't go to the store? Are you up in sales because people had to order more online?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, we have a not only an essential product that's in demand, but we are able to deliver it direct to the home. So there's no barriers, in that sense. And so our business has definitely grown. It would have grown anyway because we were investing more in the business this quarter, after the raise, but in the first quarter and now in the second quarter. But I would say we've seen a heightened demand for the product and the service. So one of the things that we're, really, very conscious of at Pet Plate is just the health and well-being of our dogs and the peace of mind that we can deliver to our the pet parents that we serve. And that's really something that kind of basically is part of our DNA, and it's very much guiding our corporate culture, and that we're really a mission-driven brand that we come to work to do one thing, make dogs healthy and happy and make life easier for the pet parent. And that's very much the culture that we've created in the company, is one of service and being there for our customers, and our customers are dogs and people, and so it's a very service oriented culture, and a very collaborative one, really working as a team and as a unit, as opposed to kind of individually working in silos, because we know that's not in the best interest of the consumer.
So if you're not health conscious, if you're not conscious about what you're eating or putting in your body, and you're not an animal lover or an animal pet owner, you're probably not going to work there.
Exactly. People, really have to love pets to really, kind of want to work, with us. And fortunately, there's so many, dog lovers in the U.S.
There is
no shortage.
And what about this? Can you really define fresh cooked? I mean, what does that really mean? When I saw that in your marketing, right? And I'm like, okay, fresh cooked. Does that mean like there's a chef like making this stuff in a bowl, in a pan, and then it's going into a package for me, the consumer? What does that really look like, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we start with all USDA meats, vegetables, healthy grains, human grade vitamins and minerals, and everything goes into a kettle and is slow cooked in a kettle. That's the big distinction from mass pet food, which is using what is often referred to in the industry as byproduct and meat meals and fillers. And so these are parts of the animal that are not fit for human consumption. What generally happens is it gets ground up, and then it gets extruded and cooked at a high temperature so that it can be preserved for really years. So if you think about kibble, why it's able to sit in a cupboard or on a shelf for years, it's because it's been cooked to such a high temperature. It's really been burnt. And that's why it can live outside in ambient temp for years. And the ingredients that go in are really, really inexpensive, because they're literally the parts of the animal that don't make it into the human food chain. Or even worse, it's animals that were too sick to be consumed by humans. So it's a really kind of an ugly story. And so what we do at Pet Plate, which is completely different, is literally take the same types of cuts of meat and parts of the different meat, whether it's chicken, beef, lamb, turkey. We take the same cuts that would be appropriate for human consumption, and all the same type of fruits and vegetables that humans love. So butternut squash and sweet potatoes and apple and broccoli, and we then include the vitamins and minerals that balance the meal for a dog's diet, so that the dog is getting the full nutritional we meet all of the nutritional requirements of a dog, which wouldn't necessarily come if you were just to say to home cook for your dog. the likelihood of you being able to balance the meal for a dog is very low, like,
I
because it
see.
doesn't really, you won't get all those nutrients that a dog needs through human food alone. You really have to supplement it with the additional vitamins and minerals that a dog requires. And so again, we use a human grade vitamin and mineral supplement, that, same type of vitamin and minerals that you and I might eat. But we obviously compound it and mix it, in the right proportion for a dog. And then everything, as I said, gets mixed in a kettle and cooked for slow cooked for, a certain amount of time,
Okay.
but at a high enough temperature to make sure that all of the pathogens and bacteria get kind of, burnt off, but not so high that it also takes away all the nutrient value. So it's a slow cook process. And then what results from that is a really lovely, like, one pot dish for dogs that
Yeah.
has all the different, ingredients in there, and everything that gets filled into these plastic containers. And it's a hot fill process. So it means it goes in hot,
Oh, it
and then
does.
a plastic seal that gets applied immediately. And by doing that, you really pretty much eliminating any sort of contamination that could occur, because the heat is what makes it safe. And then, the lid goes on top, and that way, when you're feeding your dog, some of the containers have just one meal, but in the case of some size dogs, a container might contain 2 or 3 meals.
Hmm.
And what that means is, if you feed your dog in the morning and again at night, you'll be able to reseal that container with the lid, so throughout the day or overnight, so that the food is not open. And that's a big differentiator from our competitors. All of our competitors, they have a similar, the food kind of is similar in that it's human grade, and it's kind of a similar cook process, but they'll put the food in plastic bags, so that once you open that plastic bag, you can't reseal it,
Mm.
and you have to
Mm.
find ways of transferring it to another type of dish. It's a little more complicated. Also, our food, I would just say, is a better quality, in the sense that we use the type of, I mentioned the cuts that humans eat, things like the muscle meat and liver, which liverwurst, sort of, people love that. We do notice that our competitors will use things like gizzard and heart and kidney, things that aren't really palatable to humans, and we think are in fact not that palatable to dogs, and maybe not. So it's a really high quality meal, and it's coming out of a facility that is making human food. So,
I see.
like,
Oh,
Plate's the only pet food made in the facility that makes our food. It's everything else coming out of there is human food, delicious, stews,
wow.
chilies,
Wow.
soup, that type of thing.
Interesting. Now, okay, now I want to give you a nice compliment here, and then I want to ask 2 business questions that I thought of, because I'm a pet owner. You sent me some samples,
Yep.
and Ryder from Riderflex. Ryder is our
That,
mascot dog. So Ryder's been enjoying it, loves it. And I've been easing him into it, just like you taught me. You sent me
yeah,
nice directions and just said, "Hey, let's ease him into it." And he's,
yeah,
I mean, first of all, he loves it, no problems.
yeah,
My first thought was, he's going to have dietary problems. He's going to, mess in the house or something, because
yeah,
his diet's getting messed up. It's going to change. None
yeah,
of that. None of that happened.
yeah.
None of that
Good,
happened. Didn't get sick. Didn't have any potty
good,
problems. Nothing.
good.
So, and loves it. So there's my compliment. And by the way, I also loved how it was packaged. It just has such a nice professional feel. Then I put my CEO hat, because before I started Riderflex, I ran a couple of $40 million companies as a CEO. So I put my CEO hat on, and I thought, okay,
Yeah,
now let me ask for some business questions here. My first question was, man, this packaging is awful fancy. How much does this
right,
cost?
right.
And I'm just thinking, the average consumer, because you were kind enough to send some to Scott, the co-founder of Riderflex, and he called me right away. He's like, "Man, did you see this packaging?" And I said, "Yeah, I saw it." I'm like, "Man, it's super nice. I'm just wondering how
Yeah,
much it costs." So, how does packaging affect you? Is one of my
yeah,
questions. And then my other question is, what my second thought was: this is great. It feels expensive. Can I afford to move Ryder to this? I don't
sure.
know. And so,
Right.
talk about the end price for the consumer and the packaging, if you don't mind.
Of course, yeah. No, look, the packaging, it's one of the major components of our COGS, our cost of goods.
I can believe it. I can believe
But
it.
but the thing is, all packaging costs money. Like, I don't know that the cups that we use are any more expensive than, the various bags and containers that are out there. I mean, what makes it a little more expensive is that it is pre-portioned. So, but the equivalent or the analogy might be like for human yogurt, right? So you can get, we use the same cups actually that a lot of the major yogurt producers, put their yogurt in. So, I mean, it's a little different now because we're all kind of working from home and eating most of our meals at home. But imagine, when you're out there and you're on the go, how many, like if you eat yogurt, you're very likely to consume yogurt in a smaller cup. That's one serving, right? If you're at home, you might have a larger container of yogurt, maybe it's 20 ounces and it has a few servings. But I think, generally speaking, people have gotten, kind of conditioned to expect single serve portions or at least, smaller, like fewer portions per serving or per container. And really, we're just translating that to dogs. So what's great about it and why people are willing to pay a little extra for it is that, again, it's a little different because we're all in this lockdown kind of mode right now in the US. But in normal times, like if you were to say, go, run and take a morning walk with your dog, you can throw that cup in your bag and just off you go to the park. And when you're out, you can take the lid off and they can eat the dog food right there. Say you're taking your dog to work, which a lot of people do, and you're going to want to feed your dog at 5 o'clock before you leave the office.
That's
same
good.
thing, throw the cup in the bag. So, while you're just going to have to pay a little bit more for that convenience, and it's not so much more than like the bulk containers that we could have gone with. We just know that people really do want to have that extra convenience. And so,
yeah, it wasn't as expensive as I thought, by the way, because it has such a professional, nice branded feel. I mean, the branding is great, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But to your question about price, I know you wanted me to adjust price. I mean, so your listeners and your viewers know what to expect from PetPlate.
Yeah.
We have two types of plans: a full plan, which is that you transition your dog completely to PetPlate, and that's the only thing that the dog will eat as their primary diet. Then you might introduce, a treat here and there. If in that case, the average price per day is going to be about $6 per day. So it's about $3 per meal. And that, is going to vary. So if you have a Chihuahua, or a teacup type dog, 5 pounds or less, it's going to be a lot less than that. But if you have a Great Dane,
like $3 a day for a little
for a small dog, absolutely, something like $3 a day. If you have a really large dog, a Great Dane, a dog that's a 175-pound dog, you can expect to pay more than $6 a day. But that's true of any food because those dogs can consume up to 2 pounds of food per day. And this is a meat product. It's very heavy on meat because that's what dogs really need. Then we do have another type of plan, which is our topper plan, which is where you top off your existing food or maybe your homemade food with our food. And that's a great option if you are on a budget, or say you don't want to move away from your current food. You can mix it in. About 25% of their diet can be PetPlate, and then you can expect the price to go down accordingly. So, instead of $6 a day on average, if you're on a topper plan, you can expect to pay $2 or $3 a day, depending on the size of the dog. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if I'm doing a little mixed deal for Ryder, I'm spending probably $1 or $2 a day, maybe, or something like that. Okay. Very good. All right. So, that helps me a bunch. Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate it. Let me ask you a couple of questions here before we run out of time. CEO, first time CEO advice, just switching gears just a tad. I want to make sure I don't miss out on this for you. This is your first CEO role. So you've been in it now for 3 years. So I'm assuming there was some learning pieces in there for you. What 2 or 3 pieces of advice would you give first-time CEOs? They just got promoted, especially female CEOs, just got promoted. What would you tell them here on this podcast?
I would say open mind. Again, just like we stressed, in terms of career path, you want to keep an open mind. I think that kind of learning never ends. And, one might make the mistake that as CEO, you need to have all the answers and everything, everything should be figured out. and it's all up to you. And it really isn't. I think the
Yeah.
best leader is almost like the opposite of that. They're like a sponge, taking it all in from every direction, whether it be their, their peers, their staff, their vendors, their partners, their, shareholders, their board members. Like, I really do think you need to be influenced by the people around you to make the
Mm,
best decisions.
mm.
But the
Great
second
advice.
point, if I had to give a second piece of advice, it would be also to be decisive. Like, so by being open-minded and getting input from all around you, from the people you trust and the people who are also invested in the success of the
But
business, doesn't mean you should waffle and, kind of be so deferential that you'll just listen to anybody, the next good idea. I think you have to take all that input and assimilate it, and
make it, yep, make a
make,
decision.
strong decisions, and stick with those decisions and own them, and also be accountable. So I guess the third point I would make is accountability.
Mm.
That's the other piece. Like, once you've made that decision because you had the best information, because you were listening to everybody,
Yep.
you do, I think as a CEO, it's really important that you are accountable for those decisions, meaning don't start to point fingers and blame others when things go wrong, because things will go wrong. And I think you have to be, acknowledge the mistakes are made. They're made every day, and the way we learn is really from our mistakes, and you shouldn't
Mm.
be afraid of making mistakes. And I think as long as you're willing to own up to whatever that mistake was, be able to report out the learning, and be able to kind of course correct and show how you can benefit from that experience, then the people around you should respect that and should kind of give you a pass. And you hopefully don't make too many mistakes. But there, that's the other piece, is you just have to be brave and own up to it, and not kind of just shy away
Mhm. Mhm.
from decisions that you made, whether they were the good ones or the bad ones.
I can tell there's been some mentors and advisors in your life as you've moved along here, right? And so let's talk about that for a minute, because now, as a CEO, as an experienced CEO and an experienced advisor and board member, you're giving the advice and some of the mentoring that you used to get.
Yeah.
What advice would you give a first time advisory board member, or just advisor? Maybe they first time they were asked to be an advisor, haven't done much of it before. What advice would you give those folks?
Again, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but I would be a really good listener, an active
Okay.
listener. I think there's a tendency, if you if you're asked to be an advisor, you get put on an advisory board. They are doing that because they believe you have great input and knowledge and experience and skills that you can share, and you should. But you shouldn't come in with this the notion that everything,
Right.
and you're there to teach everybody how to do it, and be kind of you want to really be mindful of not overstepping your boundaries as an advisor, because there are people in the, let's say, in the business, running the day to day, really have their eyes on everything. What you're able to provide is some outside perspective, and that's a good thing.
Mm.
And that's what they'll appreciate, that you have more of a bird's eye view. But the only way you can really be effective, when you are at a 30,000 foot level, is to be an active listener and really
Mm.
understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, without getting into every detail. Really try to understand what are those people going through, and then with your wisdom, your experience, and your kind of knowledge base, you can then start to provide that high level advice, because you're not there to run their business. You're there to give sort of perspective and high level advice, but it starts with listening, not with talking.
You're pretty busy. Great advice, by the way. You're pretty busy because you're an advisor for a few different companies right now, and you're running your own company as a CEO, and you're a mom of a 9-year-old. And so trying to manage a family. How are you? What advice do you have for the CEO that's trying to manage all this? How are you managing your time? How do you deal with that?
I think one kind of trick for me is like to try to compartmentalize things a bit.
Mm.
It is good to just have windows where you're committed to doing certain things at a certain time. So like for me, the work day, when it starts, it's really all work. And then when it ends and then I can switch gears and be with my family. I'm completely focused on my family. I'm not checking my email. I'm not looking at my phone.
Good.
Once in a while there'll be an urgent message will come in. People know if they need me urgently outside of sort of the normal working day that they can text me. And of course I'm always on in that sense. And my family is very understanding and supportive, but you can get easily distracted, and boy, more so now than ever, right? When you're at home working, it can all bleed together. I think if you can create those guardrails and say, this is the window where I'm doing this, and this is the window where I'm doing that. What's great about it is it allows you to almost like refresh and recharge. And then when you go back, switch back to the other audience, you're kind of more awake and alive because you haven't been mired in all that detail for so long. You get renewed energy by the other audience. So I think that's an important thing to do.
Totally agree. Two last questions here because I know we're almost out of time. If you could call that young lady coming out of NYU, and by the way, I love the fact that you put your year on your LinkedIn profile too. A lot of people, they're like, I'm afraid to put my year on there because I don't want anybody to know how old I am. I think that's crazy. But coming out of NYU in '92, what if you could call her today and talk to her? What would you tell her?
I would say enjoy all of the different steps, because it's so varied. Actually, the life that you live, like your early 20s is very different from your late 20s. Your early 30s is very different from the late 30s, and really just be in the moment, enjoy that time in your life because it'll change. Like, I think when you're in it, you kind of get the impression like, this is it, this is what life is like, but it's not, it's constantly evolving. So the more you can live in the moment and take advantage of what's in front of you at that time, really stretch it out, and get the most out of it, the best experience you can, because life will go on and it'll feel different as you go. And it's easy to be always thinking about the next thing. I think it's important to live in the moment.
Great advice. Really love it. Last question. If you could put your core purpose in life into a sentence or two, and I didn't let you tie that to family and kind of pushed you beyond your immediate family and said, how would you define your core purpose in life outside of family? What would that sound like?
I think it's to take care of the people around me. So like in my business, I'm most concerned about taking care of my team, because my feeling is if I take care of them, they're going to take care of the people around them. So if they're in the customer care, arena, that feeling of like my leader takes care of me, I'm going to now take care of my people, which is the customer. And it goes on and on. Like if you think about like operations, I'm going to take care of my ops team, but I know that they're going to then take care of their partners, the manufacturers, the fulfillment centers, the warehouses, the logistics. Like it really does like spread, that kind of empathy and that caring. And so that's my purpose. If I can get that done, then I know I've done, a good day's work, and I feel everything else should kind of flow from that. I think if you start in the other way of like, I've got to make, the maximum amount of money today, let's say, which is in the end what everybody would like to see happen. But if that's your focus, it could, influence your behavior in a way that doesn't motivate other people or, empower other people. So I think first about how can I take care of my people, and then we'll go from there.
Love it. Excellent. Gertrude, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing your story, not only your personal story, but about Pet Plate. Really inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a joy to talk to you today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to get exposed to all of your listeners and viewers. And I'd be available if anybody needed to reach me for a question or any sort of advice. Everybody can find me on LinkedIn, and I have my contact information there, and I'm very responsive. So if anybody does want to reach out, I'm happy to talk.
And petplate.com, by the way, petplate.com. Gertrude, hang on. I'm going to hit stop on the recording, but hang on just a second before you hang up. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.